Welcome into a brand new edition of the Desmond Johnson Show here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com, your home for Triad sports coverage. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson. We just went through, in my opinion, one of the best Carolina Panther drafts in franchise history. I had to go grab my guy, Alex Zietlow from the Charlotte Observer, Panthers beat writer. He's going to help us break it down. Who were the good picks? Who were the surprise picks? The stuff that a lot of the average fans don't really recognize. Dan Morgan's still in the kitchen cooking. There's still undrafted free agents that he's still signing. Some pretty interesting names in that batch, too. We'll go through all that and more. It's the Carolina Panther draft wrap-up session of the Desmond Johnson Show. Let's go ahead and hit that intro and get everything rolling for your lunch here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. Let's go. Live with Desmond Johnson, son, the live is one. Represent NC to the fullest.
Yeah, welcome to the Carolinas. Everywhere you go, the sky is Carolina blue, the finest. Live action, feedback, the city needs that. I've been number one, no cap. Here's the recap. Adrenaline is my addiction. I'm about to relapse. Step on the turf if you won't and get your weed whacked. I'm going harder than a martyr on the slaughter end. It's the heart of man, that's a rap like a cardigan. I'm breaking records, it's fourth and inches, I count the seconds. The over-under's my roar of thunder, my secret weapon. Yeah, the game is to be told. I don't break, I break modes. Follow me on Tobacco Road. Live with Desmond Johnson, son, the live is one. Represent NC to the fullest. Well, I'm sure I think we're having some technical difficulties here. Alex, can you hear me?
I can now hear you. I did not start at the beginning. I'm so sorry.
There was some weird bubble thing that came through the internet line or something. So I think we're all good here. But East Forsyth Reagan, the semifinal number 2 tonight in the Central Piedmont Conference. We will have that live on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Myself and Chad Delp will be out in Pofftown for that. The winner of that will take on West Forsyth or Davie in the CPC championship game, which will be on Thursday night. That broadcast to be determined based on whether or not East Forsyth makes it there or not. Let's get into it. Beat writer Alex Zietlow from the Charlotte Observer for the Carolina Panthers joining us here on a Tuesday edition of the Desmond Johnson Show. What's going on, brother? How you doing, man?
I'm doing so great. Thanks for having me on the show. And real quick, you made a very interesting point of this is one of the best Panthers drafts in franchise history.
I feel it in my heart. I really do.
Desmond, I would love to pick your brain about this because one of the things that I did prior to the draft is I went through the Panthers' first 30 drafts because this was their 31st NFL draft. And I want to run by you my top 10 that I put together. And
okay, great.
And we didn't plan this at all. This is live. This is live radio. But I want to see what you think about this. Okay. So number 1, I got the 2001 draft class. I think that's pretty inimitable. You got Dan Morgan at 1, Chris Jenkins, Steve Smith at 3 somehow, Chris Linke, Jared Cooper, D. Brown, Lewis Williams, Mike Robert. Okay, that's 1. Mm-hmm. 2002, Julius Peppers, Deshaun Foster, Will Witherspoon, Dante Wesley, Randy Fasani, all those guys. That paved the way for the 2003 season. I think, okay. Number 3 is where it gets kind of interesting. I grew up on Cam Newton because I'm from North Carolina. He was just in the atmosphere. I'm going 2011, number 3, Cam Newton, Terrell McClain, Sion Fua, Brandon Hogan. There's a lot of guys who didn't that draft wasn't as deep.
Yeah.
But when you got Cam,
it's top heavy. Yeah. I could see where the conversations could probably start right around number 3 there based off of, because we're doing this off of without even knowing how these players are who's going to make the team. So it's like,
Precisely. And that's what I think is interesting about this. Let me just finish up with 4 and 5. Number 4 is 1995. That's the very first draft. And I got a lot of flack for this. When you look at how the players, but firstly, they had it was an expansion draft, so I think they had 3 first-round picks, so that kind of shifted the tides that way.
Tyrone Poole, my first host with me on Believe in Panthers when we first started going on 5 years ago. Tyrone Poole was my first co-host with me for that first season. He was the first pick in Panthers history. So
Yeah, he was in the first round. Kerry
Mhm.
Collins was also in that draft, and
Yep.
and then in 2012 you got Luke Kuechly. He's was the number one guy there, and then following him, Amini Tolu, Frank Alexander, Joe Adams, Josh Norman was a late pick as well in 2012. So that's the five that I chose to lead the top five, and then. I'm not gonna take all your time by just listening off this whole thing. But to your point about, is this one of the best drafts in Carolina history? I mean, you're not gonna know for a really long time. Obviously, like a really important thing is how they endure, if they re-sign with the team, like how big of an impact they can make in that way. But I mean, this draft is deep, man. This 2025 NFL draft class appears to be really deep, and I think the fans agree on that, which I think is just it was really good long-term planning from this front office. But I know we'll get into it, but I think that's a really compelling place to start.
Yeah, and I do feel like I think that was the main difference for me, because I always tell myself every year I'm not gonna be sitting here on Saturday watching the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds or whatever. Like, I'm not gonna do it. And every year I'm either around a radio or in front of it, just kind of sitting there watching it as it's going on. And this was one of the first years I could think of in a while. Maybe it's the malaise of the Panthers' ineptitude the past like 6 or 7 years, like to see them actually doing something that the fans actually wanted them to do, and then they go out and actually do it. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this actually has. It's like Merry Christmas or whatnot. But this was the first draft in a long time where I felt like every single pick or every move that Dan Morgan did made some sort of sense in terms of the roster. Because one of the things that I tell people all the time, and it was one of the reasons why I did not want Tedero McMillan at 8. I didn't have a problem with him as a player. Would have loved to have an 18, but in hindsight, he wouldn't have been there. He probably would have been gone within the next couple of picks after we got him. So I totally get it. And I didn't know the game plan. I shouldn't have questioned Dan Morgan. But I didn't want him that early because I wanted extra picks, because one of the main problems with this team that we saw last year was depth. Like, once they started getting injured and you started getting down to that second string, third string guy, and then the guy they pick up off the street on Tuesday just so they can play the Falcons on Sunday, that kind of thing, the last couple of weeks of the season where teams are just running up and down our back, depth was the main concern. Depth was the main issue. I'm sorry, my Chihuahua was trying to attack someone outside the door. What's going on? Oh, I'm not really sure what's happening over at the front door. But my point
It's all good, man.
It could have been a grocery bag or something that flew across the front yard. Just close the door. Just close the door. We're being loud. There's someone outside? Just never mind. All right. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Everyone has a Chihuahua in their life. They understand the maniacal sense that they have here as my daughter's trying to calm her down. But this was the year where every single pick, come on, man. Every single time that they picked somebody, I was like, that makes sense. Or, ooh, they're going to be available. So the first question to you, so I can mute my mic real quick. Now that it's over, out of the picks that Dan Morgan made, which one was your favorite pick and why?
Wow, that's a great question. I think my favorite pick, if I have to choose one, is going to be Nick Scorton. That they traded up in the second round to get this guy, this edge rusher out of Texas A&M. Man, he on Daniel Jeremiah's top 100 board, he was the 45th best prospect. He was highly productive at Purdue prior to going to Texas A&M. He had 10 sacks in 2023. He's got a nasty spin move. He's got like this chop rip move that he can do well, but like really his game isn't necessarily his bag. It's more like, and when I say bag is like the moves that he can use to move offensive linemen. It's more so his just like pure strength and his power. And that is what kind of separates him. And like the more that I read about him, the more, tape I watch on him is just like, I'm just kind of more and more, infatuated with him as a prospect. He lost. So, and one interesting thing about Scorton is he ended his season at 100 or 285 pounds, and he ultimately lost 28 pounds by his pro day. And that was just a case of a couple things. One, he said it was just a product of him being more disciplined in his dieting. Two, being more disciplined in his workout method and like getting with the trainer and stuff like this. And three, we got to remember he's one of the youngest people in this NFL draft. In fact, he was the second youngest person in the NFL scouting combine, which is something to consider. He's 20 years old. He's growing into his body. And on top of that, say he really works out well for the Panthers. They're going to pay him. He is going to get a big paycheck at 24 years old. Say if it works out again, he's and they extend him to another 4 to 5 year deal. He's going to be 28 years old and still be productive with this team if all goes right. There's just not really a lot of negatives. Oh, and then on top of that, the Panthers, if they needed one thing in the draft, they needed a really solid edge rusher. And they got a guy who can set the edge. They got a guy who can get into backfields. Like, I think they just nailed it with the Scorton pick.
I love what they did in terms of maneuvering to get to pick number 51 to get him, because we kind of knew, just knowing Dan Morgan from the previous year, just kind of knowing his mentality and mindset, they weren't going to sit from number 8 to number 57. Like they weren't going to wait all night to take a pick with all the edge rushers and pass rushers that were available in the second and third round. They traded up with Denver, gave up multiple picks to move up to number 51, took Scorton. Something that Jonathan Stewart said to me during Believe in Panthers yesterday that he liked about Nick Scorton was that he's bendy. He's got that bend. Like when some guys are real stiff coming around that corner, the guys are like the Dwight Freeney's and others that can really affect the quarterback can kind of bend their body to get around that tackle. And it's like, it's not really something you learn. It's kind of either you have it or you don't. And Scorton kind of has that. As I'm looking through the picks, now that I've had a couple of nights to sleep on it, one of the picks that keeps popping up, and we talked about this yesterday, I believe in Panthers too, pick number 122, Ohio State safety Lathan Ransom. For him to be there when they picked him, and then to see his tape after they picked him, the dude is a thumper. Like, he literally comes downhill. Every film I've seen of him, it's him just kind of running it at full speed, 20 yards from the backfield into a hole and just hitting a running back or somebody off their feet. And they wanted that kind of thing. I'm hearing Dan Morgan's words in my head that he wanted what Jonathan Stewart would call dogs, like guys that represent the Panthers. And it felt like with the picks that they were picking and some of the video they were putting out to kind of show you like what the players were like, it felt like all of them were kind of in that same vein, like that hungry dog. Princely was saying, hey, you guys are gonna have to cut me a check in 4 years, like during their video, which I was like, that is awesome. Like I like that kind of.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
I love that kind of confidence there. Was there any surprise picks out of the draft for the Panthers that you were like, oh, that's interesting? I didn't have them on my board for them grabbing.
Well, I think one point that you made that was really compelling is clearly the Panthers have a type, and they have a type when it comes to this dog mentality that you were saying. But I think also. And if you talk to my colleague Mike Kay, he will just only talk about arm length, because that's like he'll talk about arm length and the 3-cone drill in the NFL scouting combine, and I'm like, all right, dude, like, you know, the game isn't played like that, but whatever. But like, it's really true. If you look at all these prospects that the Panthers took, they have really long arms, and they are and they specialize in something. So
yes,
you said Nick Scorton is bendy. And is strong. That's even more true for the edge rusher after Nick Scorton, Princely Umenmielen. You know, sorry, you gave me a funny look when I said that. I know.
Every person I've talked to when they try to get to that name the first time, I just want to hear others say it so I can make sure that I say it right when I start using it more. I'm just calling him Princely for now, but
yeah. But Princely, I mean, he is quite bendy. He is like, if I had to choose a surprise, I am kind of surprised that he was on the board as long as he was. Of course, you know, like according to Daniel Jeremiah's top 100 draft board, he was kind of taken at around the expected time. But I mean, geez, man, he's a guy who has a really deep bag when we're talking about getting after the quarterback and getting after running backs in the backfield. And also to your point about him saying, oh, we're going to have to break your wallets or whatever. He thinks that he's a little bit, underrated when it comes to his power. And I thought that and I really like that too. He essentially said, I have the quote in front of me. Let me just read this out loud. I asked him about an underestimated part of his game. I think that's always an interesting question to ask these guys. And they said, and this is what Princely said. I think I'm a really powerful guy, and people kind of don't really acknowledge that. He then went on to say, quote, I was winning with my moves, so there was no reason to convert to power. There were times where I would go power, and it does show up on film a lot. I squat 700 pounds, so I know I have a lot of power, and I just feel like showing that a little more at the next level. So essentially what he's saying is, and this is his words, and athletes all think that they all have strong belief in themselves, which is really important. But essentially what he's saying is, I know that all these people say that my strength is my technical ability and all these things. But guess what? I can do the other things really well too. I just haven't had not that I haven't had a chance to, I just haven't had a reason to really display it. And he's going to have to display everything at the NFL level because that's what you need to do. But the more I learn about Princely, I'm really impressed. Like that day 2 was wonderful when it comes to the Panthers. I really think day 1, going with a wide receiver when the team desperately needed defense initially, and particularly Teteroa McMillan. I think that he's great. I really do think he'll be really good. But now that wide receiver room is it still doesn't have a ton of speed. Of course, a lot of people say that Teteroa plays fast and he can still be a deep threat based on how he moves and how he can make contested catches, and that's all legit too. But the natural person is just okay, what happened to Jalen Walker? What happened to going defense? What happened to prioritizing this? I think if you have any reservations about day 1 and even some reservations about day 3, I think pretty much everyone will say that the Panthers knocked it out of the park in day 2.
And that's kind of what it was, because I had to kind of eat crow after Thursday night because I was online saying, look, they're not going to pick Teteroa McMillan. It doesn't make any sense. Everything they're saying, it doesn't make any sense. And then to see that, or to find out, the best kept secret this entire NFL draft to me was that Bryce Young was throwing with Teteroa McMillan for a month before the draft happened. Did you guys have any idea that was happening at all?
No. In fact, Mike and I were talking about it, and we were just man, this was just a really well kept secret with the Panthers front office, and that's good for them. The entire draft. Yeah. The entire draft thing, we asked about Jalen Walker probably 4 or 5 times. I don't even think we asked about Teteroa to Dan Morgan prior to and that's the entire local media. Mm-hmm. There's always revisionist history. When you come back to these things, you're always going to use words like "this was my guy," "this was our guy," because you know what, that's who you got. Right? So it is your guy. So you got to be a little bit you got to be careful about everything. But if they truly did love this guy this much, if Bryce Young was actually going to them and saying, "Hey, you should take this guy," that was something that the local beat didn't know. So
I gained a lot more. I already had respect for Dan Morgan and Dave Canales to begin with after last year, but after finding all that out, I'm like, so somehow, some way, y'all were able to keep this under wraps for at least 3 or 4 weeks that they've been out there throwing together. And then when they did it, it was okay, I think a couple of teams, I think the Rams and somebody else I saw maybe called up to see about trading or whatnot. At the time, looking back in hindsight, would Jalen Walker have made as big of an impact on the team as a whole as Teteroa McMillan probably will on offense? And I was like, probably not. And with the amount of edge rushers that were in the draft, I'm like, they can kind of pick this up on day 2. I'm okay with it if they do defense, priority, day 2 and day 3. And that's exactly what they did. And some of the picks that they got, you were mentioning the speed in the wide receiver room. One of the picks that I really am intrigued about is Jimmy Horn Jr. From Colorado, where he I'm not now, before people jump down my throat, because Panther fans are known to jump down your throat really, really fast. I'm not saying he's going to be Steve Smith. I'm just saying he looks like the type that could be the same track that Steve Smith was, in terms of Steve Smith was drafted not really to be a starting wide receiver with the Carolina Panthers. He was drafted for special teams, really. And he built himself up to the point where they couldn't keep him out of the starting lineup. And every time he touched the ball, first time he touched the ball, I think it was a punt return for a touchdown. And there was some sort of electricity with him. There was that juice. And I feel like Jimmy Horn has that. Now, again, I'm not saying that Jimmy Horn's going to be a potential Hall of Famer and lead the franchise in receptions and ice up and all that stuff. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that he probably got drafted more so for special teams. And because of his talent level, I think he can actually advance in that wide receiver room, which is now got a lot of bodies in there. Before I get you out of here, though, the unrestricted free, the undrafted free agents that came in, and really before that, actually, sticking with the wide receivers, someone that's not an undrafted free agent, but someone who was an unrestricted free agent is a former Clemson standout Hunter Renfrow, who got signed. Has gotten a lot of news on social media regarding this. What are the odds of Hunter actually being on this 53-man roster day one, week one of the NFL season? Or was this just kind of something like kick the tires and see how it goes? Or do you think they have plans for Renfrow?
My goodness, dude, it's a great question. It's a great question. So let me lay out this wide receiver room real quick so we can kind of figure out where he fits in. Teteroa McMillan, Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker, and let's say Jimmy Horn becomes the Steve Smith, as you are clearly indicating.
Please put that there.
But let's say that Jimmy Horn is the fifth receiver when they first finalized the 53-man roster. The other guys are David Moore, Hunter Renfrow, Dan Chisna, and if you want to go with any of the undrafted guys, you got Jacoby George, Kobe Hudson, or Moose Muhammad.
Well, I saw Jacoby George. I just saw before we came on, they gave him like a $200,000 signing bonus. So apparently they really think he might have a shot here for that. So I would say put him in there. And then Moose the third for just sentimental reasons. I don't know how far along the chain will go, maybe practice squad, but carry on.
Well, no, but your point about George's like really big contract. Remember, Jalen Coker got a really sizable undrafted free agent kind of deal coming into Carolina last year, and he initially didn't make the 53-man roster. You can wrap that money somehow into a practice squad spot. So like there's a possibility there. Of course, Jalen Coker turned into a contributor, but only after Adam Thielen hit the IR or the injured reserve, and he kind of played his way with his opportunity. So I just listed out all these receivers. Like, let's say, like maximum, the Panthers are going to have 7, like somehow maybe 8 guys, 8 wide receivers. If you want to do that, that's ridiculous. If you remember last year, I think they only finished with 5 on the original 53-man roster, 5 receivers. And is Hunter Renfrow like Hunter Renfrow is going to have to? He's not going to beat out Teteroa, Xavier, or Adam. Not a chance. Jalen Coker, this organization really likes. David Moore is it's like Dave Canales.
That's the sweet spot. Yeah, that's the sweet spot right there.
Yeah. Like they brought him back. Dave Canales loves him. They love him from a culture perspective. They love it. Like, this is a guy who reportedly was playing hurt at some points during last year and was just like a tough guy and would always show up and he was really reliable for Bryce Young, particularly in the red zone. So where does Hunter fit into all this? That's the compelling question to me. Yeah, man, I don't know. I like him as a talent. Obviously, he's a Pro Bowl guy. It's just going to be difficult. You know,
it almost feels like it's a year early because it feels like he would be the replacement for Thielen almost in terms of like similar type of games, running the slot. His nickname is the Route God. Like, I was watching some tape of Renfrow running some routes. I'm just like, ooh, that is nasty. And I don't know if he can still do that. He had an injury. He hasn't played. He didn't play last season, if I'm not mistaken. And I've seen a lot of people, why are you giving him a roster slot? He hadn't played in 2 years, blah, blah, blah. A lot of people wanted him here out of the draft, like when he came out a couple of years ago. And then the Moose Muhammad III from Texas A&M, giving him a shot as an undrafted free agent as well. I actually covered him. He played at Myers Park in high school. So we actually did some of their games. They actually came up here and played Glenn in a playoff game back in 2019. It was sold out, cars all up and down the streets or whatnot. And Glenn actually won that game over Myers Park. So I'm very familiar. Well, not very, but I'm familiar with Moose III. I wish him luck trying to get through because there's still a lot to do to get in there on that roster. Before I get you out, though, the one more last bit of news for the Panthers that kind of went underneath the rug, but it's really important in my opinion. The Panthers extending Ike Ekwonu's 5th year on his rookie deal, which will keep him in Carolina through 2026. Talk a little bit about the growth of Ike from when you first started covering the Panthers to now, where all the high school coaches I'm around all the time, they always like if an offensive lineman's name's being called out, he's doing something wrong. We're not supposed to even really be hearing their names. And from his rookie year, where Icky's name got called 3-4 times a game, it felt like on the broadcast, to last year where it felt like he kind of settled in and finally had some guards beside him that he could kind of mentor with and whatnot. Talk to me about the growth of Icky and this move, which was kind of quiet, not really a lot of fanfare with it with the draft and how they did it immediately after, but Dan Morgan getting his left tackle signed up.
Yeah, no, just generally speaking, I personally really agree with the decision to pick up his 5th-year option. I think it was a pretty no-brainer-ish of a move in many ways because, Dan Morgan said this a couple times, guys his size with his arm length don't just grow on trees. And they invested a first-round pick in him in 2022. He has grown a lot, as you were saying. His rookie year, he actually did have a pretty good season. It was actually his sophomore season where he kind of like fell off a little bit, struggled in the pass protection and all these things. And he struggled with the rest of the offensive line in 2023 because we don't need to relive that 2023, season.
I almost give him a mulligan for that year because that was the Frank Wright, Thomas Brown, who's in charge year, right? So
that was rough, but I mean, he really stepped up in 2024 as a pass protector. He will tell you that. And I also think the Panthers didn't select an offensive tackle in this year's draft, and I think there's a reason for that. I don't think it's a coincidence that they didn't do that because I think that they see Icky as a long-term guy in Carolina, just like they've been saying. The interesting thing is going to be what you do at right tackle with Taylor Moton. He has a massive salary cap hit this year. It's this isn't his salary, but according to Over the Cap, it's the team's cap hit that they're taking on after all the restructurings and all this stuff is like $31 million or something. So he's taking on a massive salary cap hit for the team. And, with the increase in the salary cap, and I don't want to dive into too many numbers, but with the increase in the salary cap, the Panthers are opting just to pay out Taylor Moton's contract this year and then see what happens in the future, as opposed to extending him to ease that cap hit or whatever. So, at the ends of that offensive line, you got questions, but the initial one was answered with Icky. And then that interior is pretty solid. You got Robert Hunt, absolutely coming off a Pro Bowl season. Damian Lewis, who you literally never hear his name called. That's how good he is. And then, at both Cade Mays and Austin Corbett at center proved that they could be really good too. So, the Icky news is good, but hey, guess what? Kind of like what you were saying, the fact that it wasn't a big deal is kind of a good thing,
Yeah.
That's what I got to say on that.
Follow Alex on X at AlexZietlow05 for the latest. Him and Mike K do excellent work over the Charlotte Observer. You guys come from a long lineage of Charlotte Observer Panther beat writers that I've had the pleasure of working with, from Alana Getzenberg to Joe Person to Brendan Marks. So keep doing what you guys are doing. We love being able to have you guys on here in the Triad to give us the lowdown on the Carolina Panthers, and hopefully we'll be able to keep bringing you and Mike on throughout the season as we get closer to it's like it never ends because rookie mini camp is next week, I think it is. So it just
stuff happens in May, and then
I'm going on vacation.
And then all of a sudden it's late July and it's training camp, and guess what? Training camp means the season. There's really no difference between training camp and the preseason in many ways for us. I mean, the fanfare. Well, actually, the Panthers aren't going to have fans. I was
going to say we talked about it on Believing Panthers yesterday, how there's going to be no fans, and Stu was like, "Well, some years we didn't have fans and they were allowed to come." So there's a difference. He was like, "If I'm out there grinding, I don't necessarily want fans out there watching me grind." So the players might be indifferent on or whatnot. I don't know. They might switch that up by the time we actually get to it, based on the fans and what they think. But definitely follow Alex, follow Mike on X. for the latest work with the Carolina Panthers for the Charlotte Observer. We got to get out of here. Hopefully y'all finished your Lunchables, get back to your cubicles so you can get back to work and get out of here on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. We will be back tomorrow looking at the NBA playoffs, and we'll catch up with UNC and Duke in the transfer portal. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks so much.